Welcome to another episode of Just Some Points. Hope you had a great St. Patrick's Day this week. Certainly not as usual. Before we get going, I actually want to ask both of you a question. If you have noticed what I have noticed, or if you have an opinion on that, being in the pandemic now for a year, I noticed that I would say 95% of the commercials have not changed. Meaning you still see most of the commercials without mask, without an environment, without mask, basically just ignoring the fact that we're in the pandemic. There would have been so many opportunities, I feel, where you could actually have fun with it. It doesn't have to be just negative and run with it. Have you noticed that too?
I have noticed that. Actually, it was around the holiday time. I forget which car it was, but one of the car companies was promoting their new car. And it was people talking about how they're going to spend the holidays. And it was kids running around together. And they were saying they were going to grandma's house in their new car. And I just remember back then commenting on it saying, well, that doesn't really age well. You can't really just go over to grandma's house like you typically would these days.
Mm-hmm. For me, I can't remember the last time I watched a commercial. During the pandemic, I kind of went ad-free, and I've been watching like all of the like Disney Plus and Netflix where there are no commercials. But of the commercials that I've seen, I've definitely, I guess because we come at it from like a marketing perspective, where we kind of notice these things and these messages that are not being addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I debated it with myself, or even with my wife. If that is true what you're saying, because but I doubt it, because at the end of the day, I think those commercials are not relatable. They're they're basically saying we don't care what's going on right now, and we just ignore. I don't think I can't imagine that it is working or is working as well. Maybe I have it wrong. I was just wondering how you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you always say, or it's known, make the commercials emotional, make them, grab, emotional in any way,
Yep.
and make them relatable. And I think it's not the case. So, okay, that aside, maybe actually I'll get started today because it's kind of related to it a little bit. What I want to talk about is patient experience again. We touched on that a couple of times over the last 12 months, but I'm seeing changes again, so that's why I wanted to pick it up again. And what I mean with seeing changes, having talked with clients in the last few weeks and months, I noticed that some of them are actually already treating everything, the patient experience especially, already as if we're almost out of the pandemic. And I think it's a big mistake because, and research is showing that at the moment. There are still a few things we have to make sure. Easy appointment scheduling availability is really key to patient experience. Comprehensive safety procedures on your website or wall available. Very important. The need for in-person versus telehealth appointments. If you can offer in person, which most of them do, practice can do today, do that, but do not ease up on the telehealth. Accommodate for elective and non-elective services, and have good information about COVID-19. So the overarching expectation from the patient is still that all of those things are easily accessible and available to you as a patient.
Mm-hmm.
And on the website, for example, we've seen our clients that want to de-emphasize telehealth, and that is a big mistake. The fact that you're offering in-person appointments now is fine. It's great. At the end of the day, especially the doctor, I think, prefers to have inpatient or in-person experiences with the patient. Nevertheless, the patients might not be right there yet. And if you de-emphasize, you do take away from the patient experience. So don't jump the gun on that and let's say de-emphasize on the website. Make it very easy accessible, the information easy to navigate. The phone system is something, I'm not sure if you talked about it in the past, but it's something that overall in the industry, we optimized phone systems in the past and phone trees. Some of them we've seen were really atrocious. And in the pandemic, what we've seen also is they're not being enough emphasized as part of the patient experience. So we look at your telephone tree like a website. It's where people have a first touch. There is a first touch contact with your patients, and optimize the telephone tree for those things. Have a dedicated menu item for COVID information, for procedure-related information, things that people might be interested in. Look at the telephone tree or an item the same, almost the same way as you look at a website. So if you have a dedicated page on your website for COVID, have a dedicated menu item in your telephone tree for COVID. Then review your appointment and confirmation cancellation procedures. I actually experienced it myself just a week ago, where I got very generic processing of my appointment schedule, and I was a telehealth appointment, and it was not clear from the communication with me what the right process was. It was really not great. The appointment itself was great, but then everything before leading up to it was clear to me they did not really review in detail, didn't optimize. Next, mobile experience. Make sure if you do have, you test all of those things, you do all the right things, you put them in place. Test it thoroughly on mobile devices, on your mobile. The mobile experience is really the most experienced. It's actually the path that most people take. Most traffic comes from mobile devices. And so make sure that you re-optimize everything. And then lastly, the Google My Business listings. There's so many changes because of COVID, because of state regulations change or regional regulations change. Because of that, you have to make changes. Make sure you update your Google My Business listing regularly. I talked with somebody yesterday. They said they haven't looked into Google My Business listing at least for over a year, which brings me to a pitch, or I have to mention that we are actually launching within the next 4 weeks a new tool, a new add-on to Triage Track, which I highly recommend you to look into. But with our Google My Business management tool, you can actually have your staff very easily manage your Google My Business listings without them being actually a specialist in Google My Business or having to go into Google My Business listing platform. So that's the site, but even without our tool, make sure that all of those things are actually in place, and do not move on from the pandemic, even if things move on, if things are easing up. And I really feel, after having talked with a few of my clients, that people are jumping the gun actually a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes into our overarching theme of the on-demand expectations that users have to find all of the information that they need before, making an appointment and things like that. So like you were saying, making sure that all of your COVID information is up to date, because that is still in the forefront of most people's minds at this point. But also just making sure that you have an open communication channel almost 24/7, whether it's chatbots on your website or the ability to leave a voicemail or send a contact form somewhere, and make sure that you have a staff who is prepared to answer all of these questions promptly.
That's right. I think patients, even if they don't take advantage of it, they still look at it as an improved patient experience if they see that these things are available, even if they don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree. And this actually kind of opens up what I wanted to talk about today, which is email marketing, and how email marketing has really affected the US market in the past year, particularly for e-commerce. But you do bring up, Thomas, a really good point about how it also plays an effect on patient experience and within the healthcare market. But for me, I was more interested because today I learned that the US e-commerce market is on track to hit its first $1 trillion revenue year by 2022.
Wow.
which is huge. I mean, obviously with limited capacities in stores and, even just lockdowns in general, obviously that played a really, really big role in the revenue of online shopping in the US this year. But I was curious, particularly how email marketing affected this. Knowing that there are 20 million e-commerce sites on the internet right now, I wanted to know how much of that was really coming from email marketing overall. In 2020, email marketing boasts a 4,200% ROI. So for every dollar that you spent, you got $42 in return if you involved email marketing.
That is mind blowing. That's incredible. It's an incredible number. If you think about that, if you really track your revenue and you can tie them back and you really put a good measuring system in place, it's a no-brainer not to invest more into email marketing with a statistic like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And the other, portion of this is that you also want to make sure that you're hitting all of your email lists throughout their customer journey, because I also learned that the abandoned cart emails that you receive, like if you're online shopping, you fill in your cart and then you leave the page, you go on and go on about your day, and you get an email, within the hour, that has a 40% open rate. So, it really plays a really big role in, it's actually the most effective email marketing e-commerce tactic. That point is the highest open rate of the customer journey.
It's another thing I never would have thought. I never thought about that type of email marketing, but it is email marketing. Happened to me actually numerous times. And I think it plays to the fact that we all have ADD and it's just, we're shopping and do something else.
Exactly. Yeah. And the last thing I thought that was really interesting actually involves looking at the users who you're trying to reach before they even open your email through your subject line. And I learned that the subject line convinces 50% of users to open their emails. So you should never treat your subject line as just, like a secondary thought or the thing that you throw in at the end. You really need to draw your users in, no matter what industry, whether e-commerce, healthcare, the subject line convinces 50% of people to open their email or not.
Yeah, that I believe too. Actually, in the past, we don't use it anymore. I think it's outdated. But years ago, there was a tool from a marketing research institute, I don't remember what university it was, but they created an automated tool that evaluated and valued and scored a headline based on the words you used, and we used this for quite a while to optimize our headlines. And it was incredible. Mm-hmm. And we actually did it as an internal competition sometimes who could create mm-hmm. the highest scoring headline for a given blog or page. So there's really a lot you can play with words. And I know that one of the last year, there was one topic I talked about, a TikTok related topic. I don't remember what it was, but I wanted to have a very provocative subject. And it was one of the highest opening rates we had in that email newsletter when we used that, and we rubbed some people wrong, and we got a lot of engagement, good and bad. Not bad. I shouldn't say bad. Engagement is always good, but where people we completely disagreed with me, which was great, So I got into a debate with some of them, and it showed me how important it is to really not just have a subject out there, but sometimes really think about what you want to convey, what you want to say, and actually dare to push the envelope sometimes, and in order to re-engage and open.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing that the subject lines are going to change based off of the customer journey too. So obviously your subject line in the beginning with your promo code or whatever is going to be different than your subject line for the abandoned cart, and things like that. So, it was a really interesting year to follow, the US e-commerce market. A lot has changed. Social media is shifting into e-commerce and everything like that. So it's nice to hear that email marketing is still a really big player in this industry.
Right, and actually there's a lot of automation too, email automation, and more there's the tracking of traffic cross channels, meaning you might send out the email and people click on it, but then they move on, but they come back, or through ads. Sometimes when we track the journey of a lead, and we see the various channels they took before they actually converted to be a lead. The ability to track all of those things should encourage actually companies to really think broader and not just isolate and say, not just think about, okay, this is a newsletter, how much response did I get to the newsletter? The question is, how many actually people that read the newsletter ultimately maybe sometime in the future actually converted, and the newsletter was maybe the initial trigger point. So very interesting. We should definitely stay on that, because we talked in the past about how email marketing is definitely not only not dead, it's really just thriving, and it's just booming. It's not going away.
Yep.
Catherine, what do you have for us?
So this week I'm actually going to talk about how you can and why you should personalize your emails beyond just adding the recipient's name. So the first thing you want to do is you want to know why people are subscribed to your emails. So you can do this if you have a lot of different topics you send emails out. You can have them subscribe to the different lists so that they only receive the emails of those topics, and you're not fatiguing them with all of these topics that they don't really care about. So I've seen it where I'm signing up for an email and it says, what interests do you have? So I can select digital marketing, social media, SEO, things like that. And then I'll get emails with blogs and news about those specific topics. So that'll just help ensure that the emails will get opened and read, and I'm not just going to see that it's a topic I don't care about and delete it right away. Another thing that you want to do is develop your customer persona. So you want to know who it is that you're reaching with these emails, because then you have a better understanding of their interest and the traits that and why they're subscribed to your emails. And again, it's just helps you put out the content that they want to see so that you're not boring them with emails and they won't unsubscribe. And then you also want to A/B test your emails to make sure that you're sending them at the optimal times to increase open rates and engagements. Depending on your audience, it might be best to send it in the morning as people review them over lunchtime, or it might be best to send it closer to 4 or 5 o'clock for people that you view it after work, or just anytime throughout the day if your audience is somebody who's not working a 9 to 5. So it really just depends on who you're reaching. And that's why you want to do the A/B tests to figure out what times people do open and engage with the emails.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, because each industry, each target group has its own specific. We, for example, we market obviously a lot to doctors. And what we have found, because they're all early birds, especially the ones that are in the OR, a lot of them read their emails early in the morning at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, because they really get up early. So we send our newsletter out because of that, usually early in the morning, and we see opening rates early in the morning. And then weekends, they open a lot, because a lot of the doctors we know don't read a lot of emails during the week, or not as much, and they catch up on the weekend. So to know your audience, I think, is a really, really important thing, because in other areas, as you said, in other industries, it might be just the opposite. So that's also very, very interesting on the personalization. Again, there are a lot of tools out there now to help you with that, and I think it's a matter of how sophisticated do you want to become. But to both of your topics or your points, I think email marketing is something that you really should pay close attention to. It's quite frankly also, I think Melissa, you didn't touch on the cost, but I think we talked about that in the past too. It's one of the cheapest forms of marketing too. It's like you have to put the stuff together, you have to put the time into understanding what you want to do, but the marketing action itself is very inexpensive.
Yep.
So. Great. That concludes another episode of our podcast. Hope you thought it was interesting. Talk to you soon.